Hey guys, Gary Cook here with another episode of Divas Dive. And it's late, so we're not in the studio. We are recording this in my den, on my couch, at almost midnight. I had nearly 2 hours of podcast recorded, talking my way through all of the Sasha Banks issues that are currently going on in the WWE. Then when I got to editing all of that footage, I realized that's not the issue. That's not what we need to be talking about. That's not the problem. That's a symptom of a much larger problem. Yes, it's awful how she's being treated, but it's a bigger issue as a whole that the WWE is facing, and it just illuminates why this entire idea of a women's revolution is nothing but lip service paid to us by Vince and Stephanie McMahon, and they're just using the hard work of women like Sasha to bank and cash in on, and then kick them to the curb in favor of doing business as usual. So a lot of fans praise this generation of women's wrestlers, saying that the Divas era is over and the Divas are gone. But they're not. We're still in the Diva era. We've never had a revolution. We've never had a women's division, and nothing has ever actually changed. The only thing that's changed is Vince and Stephanie realized, hey, we can make money off these girls, so let's pretend to care about what they bring to the table. I guarantee you, the second the fans stop chanting Becky, the second they stop singing her theme song back to her, Becky will get dropped, and she won't get another push until the fans get behind her again. That's just the way it is. Sorry about the shaking camera. My cat just decided to transfer across tables. One of the issues of not being in the office is she has easier access to that. But back on topic. Look at, even just this past year, who have been our women's champions in WWE. You've had Alexa Bliss. You've had Charlotte Flair. You've had Nia Jax. You've had Carmella while she was still blonde. You had Asuka. And you had Ronda. Who are the ones that have been giving meaningful title reigns out of those? Alexa, Charlotte, Ronda. The fact that Carmella held the SmackDown Women's title longer than all of Sasha Banks' title runs combined is a problem. Carmella does not belong in a league above Sasha Banks. I'm not saying she doesn't deserve title runs. I'm not saying she doesn't deserve a chance to run with the title. I'm saying there's something wrong when you have women of Sasha's caliber being stepped over, and you can add up every single title run they had to be less than Carmella. There's a problem when Nia Jax, who can't even figure out how to make a stomp in the corner look real, has a more legitimate title run than women like Sasha Banks. That's a problem. There's a problem when rookies like Ronda Rousey come in and look awful because they're working with those other women that don't perform in the ring. The only mistake WWE made was pushing the same women over and over and over again. Alexa Bliss, Charlotte Flair, Lacey Evans, any one of them you could put into the Divas generation, and you couldn't tell them apart from the Divas of that time. They look the same, they have the similar personalities of those things, and those are the ones the McMahons are drawn to. Clear as day, nothing has changed. Out of that group, Charlotte's your only top tier competitor. Alexa teeters in the upper mid card, but when you have all the talent that they have on this roster, she's not a cornerstone piece. She's a upper card enhancement piece that's great on the mic, that can get heat and feuds, that can bring a good presence for the crowd to get behind somebody else to be against, but she shouldn't be your corner piece. The issues Sasha Banks are having are the same ones that Ruby Riot's having, the same one Sarah Logan's having, the same one Liv Morgan's having, the same one Asuka's having, the same one that Becky was having before the crowd got behind and pushed her so far. The McMahons have a type, and that type is diva. They don't see a difference they don't recognize the difference that the fans want. To Vince McMahon, and apparently to Stephanie McMahon, diva with blonde hair, big boobs, and kind of this snarky mean girl personality equals women wrestling. They don't differentiate those two things still, because the women they're pushing still fit that exact same mold. If they were pushing women's wrestling, Lacey Evans would not be getting pushed to the title so quickly. If they cared about women's wrestling, Nia Jax would never have had a title run to begin with. If they cared about women's wrestling, Ronda Rousey would have been working with the best talent they had, not the talent that they wanted to be the best talent they have. Sasha Banks did what Nia Jax couldn't do, what Alexa Bliss couldn't do, what Charlotte Flair couldn't do, what Becky Lynch couldn't do. She got a decent match out of Ronda Rousey at Royal Rumble. The match between Sasha Banks and Ronda Rousey was the only title defense Ronda ever had that looked like a legitimate wrestling match that should be considered part of a championship run. And it's not because of Ronda. It's because of Charlotte. That match, better than Ronda's work in the main event at WrestleMania 35, hands down. Because at WrestleMania 35, Ronda was there for one reason and one reason only. Well, two reasons technically. The first, she had to eat that pin to crown Becky. Second, to get big bumps to make the crowd go, oh, whenever she took a hit. And then the rest of the match was all Becky and Charlotte putting on a wrestling match that Ronda randomly showed up for. Sasha Banks is the only one who got Ronda Rousey to actually have a wrestling match that was actually worthy of a world champion. And what thanks to Sasha get? She gets shoved into a tag team that was a dismal failure because she's not a tag team wrestler. She got shoved into a tag team that was a dismal failure because Bayley's not a tag team wrestler. She got shoved into a tag team that was a dismal failure because she had to be a face, and Sasha is a horrible face. She is by nature the boss. She is by nature a heel. That is what she does best on screen. And they won't let her be that because she doesn't fit the mold of what they want. So they pushed her into this boss and hug thing that she asked for so that she could get some screen time. And that was a mistake. That might be the biggest mistake they made in all this, was promising a long run to an unproven tag team to carry unproven belts and have awful matches. That's on Sasha and Bayley because they're not tag team wrestlers. They deserve to lose those belts. What didn't need to happen was that tag team ever existing. What the WWE did, and what we should all be mad about, is they denied us Sasha versus Becky. They denied us Sasha versus Charlotte. They denied us Sasha versus Asuka. They denied us more of Sasha versus Ronda. They denied us a four-way dance at WrestleMania between Sasha, Charlotte, Becky, and Ronda. That all could have been getting built. That all could have been getting done, and it would have made for an amazing story. We could have had Sasha versus Ruby Riott matches. Those would be amazing to watch. But what we got was Sasha versus Nia Jax. Boston Hug versus Nia Jax and Tamina. Boston Hug against Nia Jax and Tamina again. Boston Hug against Nia Jax and Tamina again. Over and over and over. It's just, Everybody keeps praising the WWE for this big women's movement, but I don't see it. When I sat down and started actually looking through everything that Sasha's been through and looking through everything that's happened these past 4 years to her, and then I went, I could give you the exact same video, just remove Sasha, insert Ruby Riott, insert Asuka, insert Becky Lynch, insert any other talent they're not using on the main roster that can legitimately wrestle. Nikki Cross. I fear for when Kairi Sane and Io come up, because they're going to be in that same boat. If you're not Lacey Evans, if you're not Charlotte Flair, if you're not Alexa Bliss, you're not getting a push. And this isn't a knock on Alexa, and this isn't a knock on Charlotte. I love them both. It is a knock on Lacey because she's unproven for the most part. I like Lacey. I think Lacey has lots of potential as far as her in-ring work goes. I think the sky's the limit for her, but she's not good enough to be getting placed in a feud with Becky Lynch this early on. The only reason she's there is exactly for what Becky Lynch said. She's Charlotte Jr. And that's all Vince McMahon sees is, hey, she's blonde, she's busty, she's probably going to sell tickets for me. And he's not banking on women's wrestling. And Stephanie McMahon isn't banking on women's wrestling. For the fact that they're touting this women's revolution, but they're only pushing Charlotte, Ronda, Nia, Tamina. On that list, Charlotte's the only one that deserves to be pushed. Ronda was an overhyped rookie that got where she got because of her name in the UFC. She didn't have a single good match outside of that Sasha match in an entire year. The champion went an entire year and only had one title defense that was a decent match in the ring. And that was against Sasha. That is a problem. And the problem isn't that Sasha's a crybaby. The problem isn't that Sasha was in a tag team. The problem isn't that Sasha isn't a good worker. The problem is Vince McMahon, Stephanie McMahon have ingrained in their heads that women's wrestling equals diva, and diva equals big chest, blonde hair. That's it. And that's what they keep pushing. Talent doesn't matter. The quality of your match doesn't matter. All that matters is that you fit their mold. They could be making so much money if they push the right talents. There's so many talents that they would be making money hand over fist if they just let them go out there and perform. Excuse me. Instead of feeding them over and over and ruining their women's division. They could have such a strong women's division because I would say, by and large, the depth of talent on the WWE's women's roster, counting Raw, SmackDown, NXT, NXT UK, surpasses their men's roster by miles. The handful of good workers you have on the men's side is dwarfed by the number of amazing workers you have on the women's side. But they won't let them shine, so nobody else knows that unless you follow the indies. Or unless you dig deep and go into NXT to see it. Or go into NXT UK to see it. And it's a shame. And it's not... And that's what we need to start doing as a fan base of women's wrestling. We need to stop going, poor Sasha, and realize that Sasha is just a symptom of the bigger problem. We need to back Sasha. We need to support Sasha for sure. But we need to go, look, you did this to Sasha. You're doing it to Ruby. You're doing it to Sarah. You're doing it to Liv. You did it to Becky. You're doing it to Asuka. And just go down the list to everybody they're doing it to and point out that this isn't a women's revolution unless it's based around the women being seen the same way as the men, and they're not. What has Lacey Evans done to deserve her title shot? Nothing. What has Nia Jax done to deserve to be in a title picture? Nothing. What has Tamina done this past year to deserve to be in the tag team title picture? Nothing. What is the point of booking these women over and over and over again just to feed them, just to feed better talent to them? It's so frustrating to watch. And it's why if you look at it by what is showcased in WWE, Their women's revolution is a joke compared to Impact Wrestling, which plays on Twitch TV for free. If you watch a single episode of Impact just for the knockouts, it's better than anything WWE puts out on Raw or SmackDown 9 out of 10 weeks. And I would stack that women's roster against anybody in the WWE and say Impact will do it better. Because there's so few people that the WWE knows how to book that they can't even hope to compete with Impact. Impact had one of the most compelling storylines, I'd say, in women's wrestling in a long time in the Demon Bunny story with Rosemary and Allie. They have the Tessa Blanchard and Gail Kim, which has just been amazing. They have Madison Rayne, who came back and looked phenomenal in the ring. They have Jordynne Grace, who is just... she is the beast incarnate of women's wrestling, hands down. That is what a monster should look like in the ring. She will run through people and look good doing it. Taya Valkyrie is an amazing heel. She is the backhanded, dirty playing, cheat to win heel that Charlotte wishes she was. That they try to book Charlotte as but fail miserably at doing. Yeah, Charlotte's a great heel. Taya Valkyrie is booked so much better as a great heel that it's so frustrating to watch that and go, you guys could be doing work like this too, but the creative team is just so awful they're not letting you. But Impact has a better roster. Even Ring of Honor with their in shambles Women of Honors that needs a lot of work, and we're doing a video on that as well to talk about how that can be improved. But even their roster, as far as in-ring goes, they're allowed to shine and they put on amazing matches. Shimmer has had so many matches that just outshine anything the WWE Women's Division does. Shine has. Even Rise, their developmental girls, have shown they have more ability in their little finger than 90% of WWE's main event scene has. And that should tell you something. The developmental, for what the WWE views as their developmental ground, so like the high school level, if you want to call NXT college, Rise would be like the high school level. Below that you'd be graduating out of. The high school team is outperforming your major league team. That's a problem. That's why the Women's Revolution in WWE is a joke. If I can go onto Fight TV and get better women's matches from a company that outright says they're developing the future and using girls that are new to the business, and they're putting on better matches than quote unquote the best of the best, that's a problem. That's when you have a problem. We need to stop buying into the BS that WWE is feeding us that they had a women's revolution. No, they had a women's payday. They clung on to Ronda. They clung on to Charlotte. We forced Becky in. They saw they could make some money, and then they kicked it to the curb, and that's all they did. They fed an entire roster to 3 women. 3 women had an entire roster fed to them. And not even really 3, 2. Charlotte and Ronda had an entire roster of women fed to them. Becky clawed her way into the picture. She got the fans behind her. And I'm not saying it's Charlotte and Ronda's fault. I'm not saying they went back there and said we want the entire roster fed to us. This is fully at the feet of Vincent McMahon and Stephanie McMahon. It's been well documented that Vince is the final say, that Vince rewrites all the shows, that Vince ruins everything on creative. It's all come out as people are leaving that people won't even go to work for WWE because they don't want to work for Vince because of how controlling he is of the creative side. So I'm not blaming this on Charlotte and Ronda. I'm not even blaming it on Alexis. I'm not even blaming it on Nia Jax outside of her inability to work in the ring. As far as pushes go, that's all Vince thinking he knows best when he doesn't know anything about anything anymore. He can't book the men. He can't book the women. He thinks Brock Lesnar is still a draw. Brock Lesnar hasn't drawn in like 5 years for the company. But he's still clinging on to Brock Lesnar and nursing from his teeth like a small child, begging him to stay. It's pathetic. That's what the WWE is at this point when it comes to women's wrestling. It's pathetic. And there's no other way to put it. They have so much talent and it's all just being wasted. Like, it's hard to get excited when I hear about somebody from the indies that I love getting signed to WWE, because it's like watching somebody march to their death. I want to be happy for them. I want to be excited because I'm gonna get to see them more often. It's hard to see the indie girls I like all the time. It's hard to buy that many iPay-per-views and to stay on top of it and track down YouTube videos and things like that. It's not easy. I would much rather be able to turn on USA Network or Fox or the network and just watch the girls I love to watch wrestle. But at the same time, I watch it and I just know it's going to be awful. I love the Riot Squad. I'm a huge fan of what Sarah Logan did on the Indies. I'm a huge fan of what Ruby Riot did on the Indies. But it's just painful to watch them on WWE because I know they're going to get fed to these women that have not even a quarter of the talent they have in some cases and be made to look like these awful pushovers that don't belong on the same stage with Lacey Evans. Lacey Evans is a joke compared to the skill of a Ruby Riot. Lacey Evans, yes, she has talent. Yes, she's getting better, but she hasn't put the work in to be on the level they're putting her at. She hasn't shown us that she can compete there. We've seen Ruby Riot at the top. We've seen Sarah Logan at the top. We've seen all these women do so much, and now we're watching them just be squandered after wanting this for them so badly that it's soul crushing. Because you follow these women, you follow their careers, and you become fans of them, and you get to know them on the indies, you get to love them on the indies, and then you see them show up there, and it's just like, how are they going to ruin this? How are they going to mess something up that's so easy to sell? And it's without fail. The WWE will find a way to ruin them, and because they don't fit that package that they want them to fit. So we as fans need to stop buying the line that the WWE has given us this women's revolution. We as fans need to stop endorsing the idea that women's wrestling has made this big change. Sure, they're not in bra and panties matches. Sure, they're not wrestling in pudding or gravy or something like that. But is it really women's wrestling if only 3 women benefit from it? Is it really a women's division if it's all catered to 1 or 2 women at the top to do everything? Is it really a women's division if it's just a feeder system to try to get one person over? I don't think it is. If you look at any other company that is thriving in the world of women's wrestling, they don't have just one woman. They have a group of women around them that at any moment, any one of those women could be a top contender. At any moment, any one of those women could be the champion. And that group of people is used to build each other up, to build stories, to build feuds, to build towards something. The WWE doesn't have a support system. They don't have a system that builds up competition. They have a feeding system where they bring women up, feed them to their chosen few, and then spit them back out and then wonder why they have no stars. I'll tell you why you have no stars, because you haven't tried to build a star in ages. Ronda Rousey was the last one you quote unquote built, but she came with all her own hype, so you didn't have to do any work. The only work you had to do in the WWE was figure out how to get the fans to like her, and you couldn't even do that. And it wasn't even that hard to do. But you went, hey, let's just feed all our biggest names to her, and that will make people like her. No. We've seen Goldberg. We've seen that. We've seen Brock. We've seen that. We want to see is good wrestling matches, engaging stories. It's not just about trotting somebody out there to get the job done. You think they'd know this by now because they keep trotting Roman Reigns out there, and we all keep booing him, and they keep going, but it's Roman, and he's in the ring. You should be happy. That's what they're doing with the women's wrestling. They're going, but it's Ronda, but it's Charlotte, but it's Lacey. Why aren't you happy? Because we've seen them, and we've seen you ruin every other person we like to try to make us like them more. And we don't, because we see what you're doing. But we need to stop enabling, because we've bought the line, hook, line, and sinker, because they gave us one pay-per-view that they've now not given us a second one of, because they gave us a few of the Mae Young Classics, which were very nice. But outside of those, when they actually get on the roster and they're actually trying to tell a story, what happens? You end up with the same thing over and over and over again. Look at Asuka. She had a title. What did she do with it? Nothing. So they gave it to Charlotte. Just like they gave the belt to Ronda, because that's who they wanted to have it, which is fine, but they didn't do anything with it after she had it. The entire year Ronda had that belt, it didn't matter because everybody knew she was keeping that belt until WrestleMania because they booked her in squash matches 24/7. So how am I supposed to feel like there's actually a challenger for that belt when you book everybody to tap to her in 10 seconds in the armbar because she can't wrestle longer than 10 seconds to put a good match on? That's a problem. And if you look back at all the work that Sasha has done and all the work that the other women have done to get as far as they've gotten, to have them put below the rank of these women is just ridiculous. To value a Nia Jax over a Sasha Banks, that's absurdity. And you could be the biggest Nia Jax fan in the world, and you have to admit that Sasha Banks is better in the ring than Nia, and there's no reason for Nia Jax to be propelled above her. It's just not. There's not a single argument you can make in favor of Nia Jax having longer title runs with more prominence to them than Sasha Banks. There's nobody that can tell me that Carmella deserves a single title run that lasts longer than all of Bayley's title runs combined. And until we start focusing on the fact that they're not pushing women who deserve it because they don't fit the mold or they don't have the family heritage that Vince McMahon likes, they're not going to listen. We have to stop taking the little scraps they throw us and getting excited over them. Because the second we stop cheering for the scrap they throw us, they're going to just go right back to the same thing again. So, sum it all up. Sasha got screwed. It's awful what they did to Sasha. She's been getting screwed for 4 years, and we're all just kind of waking up to it now. But that's not the problem. That's a symptom. The problem is Vince McMahon doesn't care about women's wrestling. Stephanie McMahon doesn't care about women's wrestling, because if they did, they wouldn't be booking Lacey Evans versus Becky Lynch right after WrestleMania and think that's a good idea. If they cared about women's wrestling, Carmella wouldn't have a longer title reign than Sasha Banks. If they cared about women's wrestling, Ruby Riott and the Riott Squad wouldn't be getting fed to Ronda every week to lose in 10 seconds. If they cared about women's wrestling, Asuka wouldn't be forgotten about for a month and then have her WrestleMania moment stripped from her by Charlotte Flair because they need to make that one match more important still. If they cared about women's wrestling, they would actually build up tag teams and not just shove Nia Jax to me in the ring and think that counts as a tag team. If they cared about women's wrestling, they'd be investing in a mid-card that can grow and seem like a legit challenge instead of just having two people that matter and everybody else existing to feed them. That's my 2 cents. Let me know your 2 cents. I'd love to hear from you. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about this and make some noise. The Give Divas a Chance movement was a great start, but now it needs to be more of give women's wrestling a chance, because they're not doing that. They're just looking for the same old cookie cutter mold to shove down our throats, throw us a scrap here or there, bury everybody else, and it's ridiculous. There's a reason that the WWE is my least favorite thing to cover, because it's always so awful. The indie wrestling, the Impacts, the Ring of Honors, the AEWs, they're so much more fun to cover because they just come across as caring. The women there seem so much more passionate and alive. They want to be there. They want to do their jobs. And I'm not being subjected to subpar wrestling every single time they come out. And it's not predictable. Oh, look, it's Ronda versus insert any roster female here. 10 seconds later, it's over. Yay, Ronda. It's ridiculous. We deserve better as fans. The women deserve better as wrestlers. And this entire idea of the women's revolution is a joke. The entire idea that the main event was progress? No, it wasn't progress. It was a cash-in on the fact that we love Becky Lynch and we made that main event. If they didn't listen to the fans and they went with just Charlotte versus Ronda, it wouldn't be landmark anything. It would have gotten booed out of the building. If it was just Charlotte versus Ronda, it would have gotten booed out of the building because Charlotte can't get a good match out of Ronda. If it was just Becky and Ronda, it would have been booed out of the building because Becky can't get a good match out of Ronda. They pushed Ronda and they fed the entire company to her. The year of Ronda was a setback for the women on that roster. Sure, they got to main event WrestleMania, but that doesn't mean jack when you destroyed your entire roster and the best thing you have going is Lacey Evans to challenge Becky Lynch because every other suitable challenger you made look ridiculous to make one woman. Tell me how that's a women's division. Tell me how that's a women's revolution. Really, I want to know. I want to understand how feeding all of your talents to two women to make them matter equals a great step forward for women's wrestling when you have Impact, when you have Women of Honor, when you have Shimmer, when you have Shine, when you have Rise, when you have Stardom, when you have AEW even with the women's roster they're putting together and the way they're talking about doing things there. When you have all these other companies that put so much more care, so much more emphasis, so much more love into the women on their roster than the WWE does, how is that the WWE leading the way? What have they done to lead the way? What meaningful impact has Ronda Rousey left on wrestling other than a big cash grab for Vince McMahon? Who did she build? She didn't build Becky Lynch. The fans built Becky Lynch. She didn't build Charlotte Flair. Charlotte built Charlotte. She sure as heck didn't build the Riot Squad. She buried them 10 feet deep and kept digging. She didn't build Asuka. Asuka got screwed and didn't even get to go to WrestleMania. She didn't build Sasha. Sasha's been wrestling Nia Jax and Tamina in subpar tag team matches that they've been trying to carry to a decent show. What good did Ronda Rousey leave behind? I get the whole, well, they got to the WrestleMania main event. Great. But that's not a legacy. That's not a step forward. That's not a revolution. That's a single step. But how many back steps did it take to get there? How many great talents had to get stepped on to make that happen? You can't bury an entire roster for two women and then go, look at our women's division. Look how great it is. Look how strong it is. 3 women is not a women's division. You buried an entire women's division to make a triple threat match. That's absurdity. That's what that is. So, support Sasha, back Sasha, understand all her frustrations, all her anger, all of her upsetness. It isn't the problem. It's a symptom of the cancer that is Vince McMahon. It's a symptom of the cancer that is Stephanie McMahon. They are just symptoms of a system that was built to never let women's wrestling get ahead because the entire quote-unquote women's revolution was just a bank grab for WrestleMania, nothing else. Because nothing has been built by that. If this was the historic event that they were all making it to be, the entire women's division should look stronger for it. The entire women's movement should look stronger because of this main event. But it doesn't. It looks weaker. It looks gutted. It looks pathetic because there's nobody left for Becky Lynch to feud with. She's feuding with Lacey Evans because Ronda Rousey destroyed the credibility of everybody else. She's feuding with Lacey Evans because everybody else got fed to Charlotte because they needed to make Charlotte matter more in the eyes of Vince. There's nobody else for her to wrestle because they ruined them and they have to rehabilitate all of them now. That's not a revolution. That's genocide. That is the gutting and destruction of an entire division. And Sasha's just the first one with the guts to call it as it is and say it's a joke. To say that they're undervalued and to be mad when the people that told you that you mattered, that you were the cornerstone of a women's revolution, just used you to make bank on somebody else while they buried you 10 feet deep. That's all I got. I'm annoyed. The more I dug into it, the more upset I got. This has been Divas Dive. I'm Gary Cook. Hopefully the next one will be a bit more of a positive spin on things. Be sure to like the channel. Be sure to subscribe. Let me know what you think. And let's talk about it and see if we can make enough noise to actually make a women's revolution happen. And maybe get Vince McMahon out of there so we can get somebody in there with fresh ideas that still doesn't think Sable was the greatest thing to happen in women's wrestling. Have a good night, Divas Nation. I look forward to talking with you all again soon.